My name is Jeff Lubell. I am the parent of a young adult with ME/CFS, and I'm going to be sharing some observations that we've made over the course of 6.5 years of her illness. So quick background. I'm not a doctor or a scientist, but I do work in the social sciences using a range of different methods. My daughter here is 20 now, and she has a lot of amazing characteristics, but I think the ones that are most relevant to this presentation are her diagnoses. You see here that she has hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, ME/CFS, a range of spinal conditions as well as POTS. Quick timeline here. My daughter, she's always been hypermobile, and we noticed beginning in she began experiencing symptoms in late elementary school. We really did not know about them until much later. In fact, we did not really understand that she was ill until 2017 when her severe illness began. She also had an important major relapse in 2020 that I'm going to talk about. So I only have 10 minutes. I'm going to try to zoom through a lot of material here. I want to focus on two things in particular. One is a relapse recovery pattern that we've observed in her illness, and the second is an issue of fluid dynamics. So as I mentioned, she first became severely ill in October 2017. It was shortly before her 14th birthday. She had, in both of her relapses, she experienced a discrete event that precipitated the relapse. Both of them were biphasic. In this one, she was very hot in the first phase, and then several hours later, had 10 to 15 minutes of whole body shaking that she described as the scariest moment in her life. This precipitated a period of severe illness, widespread pain, nausea, fatigue. She had to drop out of school for a period of time and did improve somewhat with rest, but has never regained her prior condition. A lot of things happened in this period. She was diagnosed. She had tethered cord surgery. But the thing I really want to talk about is a second relapse that occurred in July of 2020. Again, it was biphasic. First phase, she felt very hot and red all over. Several hours later, she had 2 to 3 hours of whole body shaking, electric-like zaps going down her arms, wave-like motion, really a lot of very severe symptoms. And we hoped it might pass within a couple of days or a couple of weeks or months, but actually it really has lasted for years. It was a lowering of her baseline, severe deterioration. She had this awful poison feeling throughout her body, extreme fatigue, nausea, and pain. Really has been confined in bed for a long period of time. So it's been 4 years, a little more than 4 years since then. Lots of different patterns we've observed on a daily basis and within the month. But take a step back, and the big picture is there's been this extremely slow recovery. It's taken her more than 4 years to kind of get back to the level that she was in July of 2020. She's still very sick, right? She's still in bed most of the day. She still needs days to recover if she comes up for dinner or if she goes out to be with friends. But she's also so much better than she was. She doesn't feel awful all the time. She can sit up and listen to music and play guitar and even tolerate a mild amount of exercise. So this leads to a number of research questions. The first is how common this pattern is. I've read a lot of stories of people with ME and long COVID, and once you're looking for this pattern, it's amazing how many times you see examples of people talking about periods where they felt better and they got better, and then they got substantially worse. The second question is whether and to what extent this pattern is central to the pathophysiology of ME/CFS and long COVID. I would propose that it is, and therefore we need to understand why it occurs, how we can prevent these relapses, and ultimately how we can accelerate the recovery. The second set of observations relates to fluid dynamics. So like a lot of people with ME/CFS, my daughter has benefited from manual lymphatic drainage. We now do it daily. And we've noticed a lot of things in the course of doing this. One is that there are sometimes clogs in the lymphatic system that we kind of need to work out. Those are often in lymph nodes, but also at the cribriform plate at the bridge of the nose. We've also noticed that there has been a change in the pattern of fluid buildup over the course of her recovery. So shortly after the relapse, any kind of exercise would lead to the substantial buildup of fluid, which if we did not treat it with lymphatic drainage, would make her feel a lot worse over time, but would be substantially alleviated when we did lymphatic drainage. But more recently, there's been a different pattern, which is that mild exercise does not trigger increased fluid and in fact leads her to feel somewhat better. Another observation is that draining fluid through lymphatic drainage from the head improves her brain fog. And finally, while doing the drainage, I noticed gradually over the course of several months that it seemed like her spine was disappearing, that I could no longer see it anymore. And eventually we realized that there had been this formation of subcutaneous adipose tissue throughout her body. I think this is an important clue that I talk about in my hypotheses. So some research questions. The fluid buildup could be due either to more fluid or to impaired removal of the fluid through lymphatic dysfunction. I would propose that it's both, that there's increased fluid buildup and we need to understand why, and there's also lymphatic dysfunction. But as I mentioned, things changed over the course of the cycle, and I think it's important to really understand why that may be. So a few of the hypotheses that I have about these events. So I believe that her relapses were caused by systemic inflammatory events that cause vascular damage. I don't know for sure what triggers there were, but there are a lot of possibilities. It could be, for example, ischemia reperfusion, could be mast cell activation, could be something more exotic related to her spinal problems. But I believe that the recovery has been due to the healing of that damage. Now, you may ask, why has it taken so long? Why has it taken 4+ years for that damage to heal? And I would propose that that's really related to her connective tissue disorder, which impairs wound healing. I also expect that people with connective tissue disorders are at greater risk of vascular damage due to the fragility of their vasculature. Now, my hypothesis is that the fluid buildup is caused by increased vascular permeability that is related to the vascular damage. This leads to the release of protein-rich fluids, and even right after July, possibly to blood, which, as we know, is toxic to the surrounding tissue and may help to explain this poison feeling that she felt for many months after her initial illness. This is not the only source of vascular permeability. It's important to recognize that vascular permeability also results from inflammation. And I think we need to better understand the relationship between the permeability that's due to vascular damage and that which is due to inflammation. There are a lot of possible explanations for post-exertional malaise. I would propose, number one, that there may be more than one phenomenon that contributes to post-exertional malaise, and number two, that at least one of those phenomenon is related to increased blood flow and velocity that is related to physical or mental exertion, which leads to the release of fluid. When you have this sort of vascular permeability, this in turn leads to hypoxic conditions throughout the body. And in the brain, it irritates the microglia and increases intracranial pressure. I do believe that there is lymphatic system dysfunction. One possibility is that it's related to the fibrin that is released in the protein-rich fluid, which, as we know, forms a gel when it gets wet that obstructs the lymphatic system. It's also possible that there may have been some damage to the lymphatic endothelium during the systemic inflammatory events. There's been a lot of attention to spinal disorders in people with ME and in people with Ehlers-Danlos. One possible relationship here is that the spinal disorders could compound the problem by inhibiting the outflow of cerebral spinal fluid, which then leads to increased intracranial pressure. Finally, I would propose that the buildup of protein-rich fluid leads to the formation of subcutaneous adipose tissue, which then becomes fibrotic and pro-inflammatory and painful. This is, in fact, one of the leading hypotheses for lipedema. So in conclusion, just want to thank all of the medical researchers and practitioners for focusing on ME/CFS and long COVID, and to the organizers of Unite to Fight who invited me to speak today. Want to encourage research on longitudinal patterns in ME/CFS and long COVID. A great example is this recent paper by Dr. Jahanbani and her colleagues. And finally, I think you will find it productive to involve patients and their carers as data collectors and also as thought partners. This is too important an issue not to use all of the resources we have at our disposal. And I've been so impressed at the knowledge and experience that people with ME/CFS and long COVID have built up over the years. So thank you very much.